Now that you're spending more time indoors, you've started to notice things. The leaky sink, the faded paint, and suddenly your to-do list looks pretty long. But when you have Thumbtack, you know exactly how to start. Thumbtack's the app that finds local pros for you. It shows you prices, reviews, and when they're available. You can find a great plumber, painter, pretty much anyone. Your to-do list doesn't stand a chance. Download Thumbtack today.
Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper, and it's Groundhog Day. Donald Trump is preparing for his impeachment trial. Now we're finally getting the first look at the arguments from both sides in this second trial of the now former President Trump. In a legal document sent out to the news media this afternoon that misspelled the word united in United States, President Trump's lawyers argued that Trump cannot be impeached because he's no longer in office. They say he was simply exercising his First Amendment rights when he spread the big lie that the election was stolen or fraudulent. And nothing Trump said, they argue, nothing was intended to incite the violent insurrection that his supporters staged after he told them to go to the Capitol and fight because the election was being stolen from them. Trump lawyers also argued that Trump never intended to interfere with the electoral vote count at Congress that day, despite the fact that President Trump said he hopes Vice President Pence, quote, comes through for us on the morning of the electoral vote confirmation. And on the day before, the count tweeted, quote, the vice president has the power to reject fraudulently chosen electors, which is not true, but he did tweet that. The House Democratic impeachment managers argue that President Trump over months and months created a powder keg and then lit a match, writing in part, quote, President Trump's responsibility for the events of January 6 is unmistakable if provoking an insurrectionary riot against a joint session of Congress after losing an election is not an impeachable offense. It is hard to imagine what would be, unquote. As CNN's chief domestic correspondent Jim Acosta now reports for us, the arguments set the stage for the kickoff of the trial 1 week from today.
Donald Trump's impeachment lawyers are trying to build a wall of their own, separating the bloody siege at the Capitol on January 6th and the then president's words before the riot.
We will stop the steal.
In its response to the impeachment allegations brought by House Democrats, the Trump defense team writes it is denied that the 45th president engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States, adding the 45th president exercised his First Amendment right under the Constitution to express his belief that the election results were suspect.
This is a very, very dangerous road to take with respect to the First Amendment, putting at risk any passionate political speaker, which is really against everything we believe in this country.
As for Trump's instructions to the crowd to, quote, fight like hell.
And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
His lawyer stated it is denied that the phrase, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore, had anything to do with the action at the Capitol, as it was clearly about the need to fight for election security in general. In their filing, which misspells United States on the first page, Trump's attorneys insist he never tried to subvert the certification of the election results. But that's not true, as he pressured state election officials.
So what are we going to do here, folks? I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break.
Even his vice president to do his bidding.
And if you're not, I'm going to be very disappointed in you.
House Democrats plan to use clips of Trump's speech as well as comments made by his violent supporters to prove the former president instigated the riot, writing, if provoking an insurrectionary riot against a joint session of Congress after losing an election is not an impeachable offense, it is hard to imagine what would be. As for the claim made by Trump's lawyers that he can't be tried after leaving office, the Democrats counter there is no January exception to impeachment or any other provision of the Constitution. Still, some Democrats worry this Trump trial will end like the last one.
I'm very worried about going through this trial and having the punchline at the end being Trump acquitted again.
Now, Trump clearly won the battle with his own lawyers over whether to include the ex-president's bogus claims that the election was stolen from him. Trump advisors say he remains obsessed with that big lie, even as his own pollster has concluded the former president lost because, in part, he was so dishonest. Jake?
Wow, who would have thought? Jim Acosta, thanks so much. Let's discuss. And let's start with this key question of constitutionality. Preet Bharara is with us, as well as Caitlin Collins. Preet, Trump's team says the Constitution specifies impeachment for the president, and he's no longer the president. Democratic House impeachment managers say there's no free pass to commit crimes near the end of a term. There's no January exception to impeachment. But Preet, I know most constitutional scholars agree with the Democrats that a former official can be impeached, but historically, I don't think one has ever been convicted, right?
I think that's correct. The historical precedent is on the side of the Democrats. There's another important fact here that distinguishes this from a case of an impeachment trial that occurs after someone has left office. In this case, the first phase of impeachment, the bringing of the article of impeachment and the adoption of it by the House, did happen when Donald Trump was still in office. So it was a proper and appropriate impeachment of a sitting president, if you think that's an important argument, which mostly people don't think it is. But in this case, that was done legitimately and constitutionally. And then the Constitution says that thereafter, the Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. And so I think the weight of the argument is on the Democrat side. But, it probably doesn't matter because we already had a vote in the Senate on this question. And 55 senators, including 5 Republicans, voted in favor of the constitutionality of proceeding with this trial, even though Trump is out of office.
Caitlin, Democrats cite in their arguments that the words that the mob heard from President Trump before they stormed the Capitol mattered and affected. Take a listen to just one of those moments.
We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
So fight like hell in the context of the president saying, stop the steal, stop the steal. Now, the Trump team's trying to argue that specific part was about election security in general and didn't have anything to do with inciting the attack on the Capitol. And it is true that fight is a common word in politics, but this wasn't just this morning, right? This had been going on for months.
Well, and they also ignored that during that same speech, he told the people who were in attendance to walk down to the Capitol, saying he was going to walk with them there, instructing them multiple times, even saying which path to use to get to the Capitol. So they ignored that in their filing. But basically what his attorneys are trying to argue in here is that the president was under this belief that he actually did not win, or that he actually did win the election. And because of that belief, he was right to use his free speech to argue that the results of the election were suspect. But they completely ignored how for months he was really laying the groundwork for this, not just raising questions about the legitimacy of the results, but outright saying that they were not real and that they were fraudulent, and that basically his supporters had been scammed out of a victory. And so he had been inciting them for months, not just that day of the speech, which is what you've seen a lot of his allies point to, ignoring what he had been saying on the road, in speeches from the White House, and on Twitter for several weeks.
And Preet, let's talk about that, because Trump's team also says in their filing of President Trump's lies, quote, the 45th president exercised his First Amendment right under the Constitution to express his belief that the election results were suspect. Insufficient evidence exists upon which a reasonable jurist could conclude that the 45th president's statements were accurate or not, and he therefore denies they were false, unquote. So obviously this big lie about the election having been stolen is utter crap, and it's been found as such by dozens of courts, election boards, everybody who is credible. But there is this issue in the law of mens rea, right? The defendant's state of mind. And as George Costanza once said, it's not a lie if you believe it. Does it matter if Donald Trump believed it?
I don't know. I don't think so, because he wasn't just expressing his view of what the election results were and whether they were proper or not. And Caitlin's absolutely right. You have to look at the context of all of this. And by the way, I think the House managers did an excellent job in laying out over dozens of pages the narrative. Remember, Donald Trump was not just complaining about the election from the date of the election onwards. He was taking action through his speech by calling up the Secretary of State in Georgia, by trying to meet with officials in Michigan, by telling his vice president that he wanted him to take a particular action. So all along the way, Trump wasn't just whining about the election. He was trying to get people to do things to overturn the election, up to and including the rally on January 6th. So looked at against the backdrop of all the things he was trying to get other people to do, it is, I think, very, very foreseeable, and you can make the argument for this in the impeachment trial, that Donald Trump knew he was riling up a crowd to do what? Not just to bemoan the results, not to just complain, but do something about them, because his last clear chance for a nonviolent way to change the election, or non-forcible way to change the election, had expired when his own vice president chose not to do that. Yeah. There was also intelligence that was being collected on this point, too, that there was potential violence. So he knew what he was doing. He was asking them to act. That's not protected by the First Amendment.
Right. And he wasn't necessarily, I mean, the most charitable interpretation is that he was asking them to go to Capitol Hill to intimidate people to overturn the elections, not commit acts of violence. But I mean, Caitlin, it's in the eye of the beholder at a certain point. I mean, we had been all covering for months. This is not true. This is not true. This is going to result in somebody getting hurt. You had Georgia Republican election officials pleading for the president to stop. He wouldn't stop.
Yeah, that's right. He wouldn't. And so big question of this is the legal team also that's representing the president here, because look what happened over the weekend. We found out Saturday night his entire election team, or his entire legal defense team, was leaving. This is a hastily arranged defense that we got from the president today in this brief that they had to file. They had a deadline by noon to do so. And look, I mean, they misspelled United States in this. That really shows you the level of how last minute all of this is. Really more doesn't need to be said, but we should note a key reason that we were told part of that legal team left on Saturday was because the president wanted them to argue his bogus claims about the election. And of course, they did not want to. They wanted to focus on the constitutionality argument of it. That's what you see made in this brief, and that's what you'll see next week.
And notably, the legal document from his lawyers refers to him as the 45th president, not the former president, still feeding this delusion. Caitlin Collins, Preet Bharara, thanks so much. The Biden administration just announced it will send vaccines directly to pharmacies across the U.S., but there are a lot of questions about if this is going to speed up shots going into arms. And then, why a conspiracy theory around baseball legend Hank Aaron is now linked to one community's vaccine fears, keeping some from going to get that much-needed shot. Stay with us.
You're listening to this podcast, so it's pretty safe to assume that you follow the news. During times like these, full of anxiety and uncertainty, it's important to manage your stress and make sure you're getting a good night's sleep. Calm is a powerful app that helps you achieve just that. Inside Calm, you'll find relaxing soundscapes, guided meditations, and over 100 sleep stories narrated by soothing voices like Stephen Fry, Kelly Rowland, and Laura Dern. And they're adding new content every week, all of it designed to help you ease stress and rest well. Over 85 million people around the world use Calm to take care of their minds and sleep better. And if you go to calm.com/thelead, for a limited time, you'll get 40% off a Calm premium subscription, which includes hundreds of hours of programming. Get the Calm app and transform the way you sleep. Start today at calm.com/thelead.
In our Health Lead today, the Biden administration announcing today it will soon send COVID-19 vaccines directly to retail pharmacies around the country. And as CNN's Erica Hill reports, this could be critical in getting more Americans vaccinated faster.
Local pharmacies now next in line to administer vaccines.
This will provide more sites for people to get vaccinated in their communities, and it's an important component to delivering vaccines equitably.
Good afternoon, folks.
The Biden administration will begin shipping directly to pharmacies next week, part of a long-promised plan to expand access. CVS says it's ready in 11 states, Walgreens announcing plans for 14 states and cities, and Puerto Rico. While the overall pace is getting better, nearly two-thirds of distributed doses are now in arms, supply remains a hurdle. This site in Phoenix can accommodate 10 to 12,000 shots a day.
I'm just trying to do my part.
But for now, there's only enough vaccine for 500 a day.
What we're hearing is that we're going to be at about this same level for the next few weeks.
16 lanes up and running at the Texas Motor Speedway.
It's very impressive.
The state's largest drive-through vaccination site, where officials say they can process 1,000 people an hour.
We do know that we have several thousand second doses that are coming due, and so we will be allocated those second doses.
Moderna asking the FDA for permission to increase the number of doses in each vial from 10 to 15.
And you can relax this time.
A new study suggests just one dose may be enough for people who already have the virus, but
previous infection does not seem to protect you against reinfection, at least with the South African variant,
prompting new urgency.
When we have to deliver 500 million immunizations between now and late spring, early summer to get ahead of these variants, it's going to be tough.
A drop in new cases, hospitalizations, and positivity rates, prompting some areas to loosen restrictions on indoor dining.
It feels good. It's nice to be out.
Even extending bar hours.
What it allows us to do is hire more people and bring more of our employees back to work.
Though experts warn this reprieve may not last.
The variants are here, they're circulating, and they are going to cause a large spike in cases.
You know, we've talked a lot in the last 24 hours about the impact of the weather on vaccination sites in the Northeast. Here in New York City and in New York State, many of the sites remaining closed for a second day.